Down the lonesome backwood roads of rural Alabama lies the community of Mott's, near the unincorporated town of Salem. Here, ghost stories, urban legends, and strange recorded events nearly outnumber the area's meager living population. I've visited this area before, literally driving less than 5 minutes between multiple haunted locations and ritual sites. But today, we will focus on the history, legends, tragedy, and ghost behind Eli Stroud Cemetery. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. If not for the small stone-columned entryway and modern chain-link fencing, Eli Stroud Cemetery would blend into the wooded area around it. It contains humble grave markers and a few stone borders no taller than the magnolia leaf litter that usually covers the grounds here, which tends to make it a haven for spiders, snakes, and anything else that creeps and crawls. But it isn't the living things of Eli Stroud Cemetery that we're focusing on today. Who was the namesake of this resting place, and the aptly named Stroud Crossroads and where it sits? Who is the man behind the name, and how does his story connect with the site's lurking ghost in modern day? Well, that takes us back, way back, to the spring of 1818. Eli Stroud was born June 4th, 1789, in Georgia. In his late teen years, he married Elizabeth Durbin and soon moved with his new bride to the Alabama Territory in 1808. Although not yet a state, many Georgians moved into the rich and lush landscape of the Alabama Territory due to the abundant resources, rich farmland opportunities, and relatively peaceful acceptance of the local natives. Life was hard, but Eli was an adventurous soul and quickly became known as one of the territory's best frontiersmen. Most notably was Eli's ability with his long-barreled rifle that was said to have been in his family for more than 70 years. Local rumors say that this single rifle took down more than 1,000 deer, and that Eli even killed as many as 11 turkey with a single shot. Now, I don't know about all that, but a marksman that carries rumors like that isn't going to be one that I tangle with just to test his ability. Despite the odds, Eli and Elizabeth seemed to thrive, and between 1809 and 1818, the couple had 4 children, Tenzie, Mark, Martha, and Thomas, all born in that order. During that time, the Creek Indian Wars came and went, seeing Eli joining the territory's volunteers. As with any war, however, tensions don't just stop because the war does. On March 13, 1818, Eli Stroud, his wife Elizabeth, and an infant child, presumably young Thomas, were returning home from a family visit in Georgia. It's never been made clear from what I could find as to where the 3 older Stroud children were at this time, but thankfully they were not present for what was about to come. On the travel home, they happened on an old friend of Eli's, William Ogley. Mr. Ogley persuaded Eli and his family to stay at the Ogley home for the night. It was already getting late in the day, and knowing the journey contained another 20 miles or more by wagon, Eli and Elizabeth generously accepted the offer. Once the infant Stroud was laid to rest inside the cabin with 6 Oakley children, Mr. and Miss Stroud joined Mr. and Miss Oakley around a small fire and spent the evening sharing stories of their times on the new territory's frontier. Little did they know, they were being watched by a band of hostile natives from the darkness. By the time the natives made themselves known, it was too little, too late. According to the Monroe Journal's Centennial Edition, published in 1966, Mr. Oakley sprang to his feet with his gun and called for his dogs, but was shot down before he could fire a single shot himself. Mrs. Oakley was fiercely protected by a loyal dog and was able to escape to a nearby ravine where she hid herself in the underbrush. Although safe in her hiding spot, Mrs. Oakley was forced to listen to the cries of the rest of the events. Mr. and Miss Stroud were able to escape the cabin, but became separated in the chaos of the attack. Eli managed to get away unharmed, but according to reports, Elizabeth was, quote, tomahawked and left for dead. Early the next morning, the nearby settlement received news of the attack. Volunteers arrived only to find Mr. Oakley and 4 of his 6 children dead. Mrs. Stroud was still alive and had managed to crawl back into the cabin. Accounts from the Monroe Journal's Centennial Edition, the 1919 book The Strouds, a Colonial Family of English Descent, along with the writings Little History of Butler County, are all the same. Quote, Miss Stroud, who was tomahawked the night before, was not dead, but had managed to crawl into the house and picked up her little infant from the others mangled in the room, and having lost her mind, she was found stuffing her dead child's skull with leaves. End quote. The dead were buried together in an old wagon body underneath an old oak tree near the cabin, while the survivors were escorted to nearby Fort Claiborne. Elizabeth Stroud died en route and was buried by the side of the road. Young Mary Ann Oakley died after reaching Fort Claiborne. Elizabeth Oakley, the last surviving Oakley child, recovered and lived another 40 years, only to die during the American Civil War. A monument stone still stands on the side of Old Federal Road, 25 miles west of Greenville, where Elizabeth Stroud was laid to rest. It reads, Elizabeth, daughter of Luke Durbin, wife of Eli Stroud, slain by Indians at the Oakley Massacre, 1818. Following these tragic events, Eli Stroud took his 3 remaining children back to Georgia to live with relatives, then returned to avenge his dead family and loved ones. Neighbors told of how on the following day, Eli Stroud shot down a lone native on a small creek near where his wife was buried. It's unknown how long Eli Stroud stalked the wilderness or how many people fell to his revenge. People report he never spoke of those events. The next 2 years of Eli Stroud's life is left to the imagination, until things seem to calm in his mind. In 1820, he had found his way back to Georgia and married Elizabeth East. One can speculate as to whether Eli's mindset never fully recovered, leading him to marry again to someone with the same name. To murky the waters of the imagination even more, Eli took his new wife and returned to his Alabama home. 4 more children came to Eli from this new union: Apland, Lafayette, Lucy Ann, and Eunice. After 9 years of marriage, though, Elizabeth fell sick and died. Eli traveled with the body and laid her to rest beside the roadside grave of his first wife. Eli then seemed to finally become dissatisfied with this place now, and in 1833, he moved to create a new homestead near what is now Salem, Alabama. Here he married again, another similar name, Eliza Perry, and had 2 more children, William and Mary. Outrunning one's past is more difficult than it seems, though. 2 years later, another native conflict arose in the area. This time, Eli immediately moved his family to the safety of Georgia, before returning with sons Mark and Applin to join a group of volunteers. After the conflict, he brought his family back home to Salem. Against the odds of this time in history, on top of his individual exploits, Eli Stroud lived to the age of 83. He passed away February 21st, 1871, and was buried across from his homestead in the family graveyard on the corner of Stroud's Crossroads. The original stone marker once read, "This spot contains the ashes of the just, who sought no honors and betrayed no trust. This truth he proved in all paths he trod, an honest man's the noblest work of God." Of course, the story doesn't end there. What do you mean, the original stone marker, you might ask? Well, let's fast forward to the 1980s, a time where the nation was gripped in fear under what later became known as the Satanic Panic. Sometime in the early 1980s, after more than 100 years in the ground, Eli Stroud's casket and body were reported missing. One can only wonder as to the purpose of this act, but it took dedication, because Eli was buried in an iron casket. The following is a statement from former Lee County investigator Steve McDonough. Several weeks later, an iron casket was found nearby, and forensics, along with information provided by family members, determined it to be Eli Stroud. He was buried in a buckskin suit, had mild degenerative disc problems, chewed tobacco, and never had any serious injuries. As of the time of my research, no one has ever been charged in the grave robbery. The body was reburied, but well before that, legends had already started circulating about the cemetery being haunted by Eli and his ghostly hound. Years and years of local stories suggest that Eli Stroud may not be at rest, and looking back on his life, can you really blame him? Many travelers and locals alike have reported seeing a tall, slender man roaming the cemetery with a ghostly dog by his side. Many believe that Eli Stroud still stalks the surrounding forest, hunting for animals and natives alike. Most locals avoid the area after sunset, whether it be of Eli or his ghostly dog. Animal bones are frequently found on the cemetery grounds, and locals insist that they are from Eli's ghostly hunts and that the haunted hound drags the bones back to the cemetery before they rest for the day. The ghost of Eli Stroud may be the most well-known haunt for the cemetery, but he isn't the only one. There are also reports of a young child, a girl, in old-fashioned clothing that will dart in front of cars driving past Stroud Crossroads at night. There have also been reports of a child stopping passing cars, only to ask, "Where is Papa?" With the trauma and heartbreak Eli Stroud carried throughout his life, on top of suggested unresolved hatred and revenge that he never processed or talked about, it's no wonder Eli Stroud Cemetery is haunted. With the family cemetery to the left and the remains of the old homestead hidden beneath the growth and vines of the local forest to the right, who knows what one would see when passing by at night? Keep your eyes open if you're passing through Stroud Crossroads. Be careful of the young girl darting in front of your car, and only stop if she waves you down if you dare. Maybe you'll see the ghostly hound dropping bones between the headstones. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll see Eli himself.